Black Fawn Distro's Takeover Tuesday, the official podcast of Black Fawn Distribution, broadcasting live across the planet and retransmitted on all major streaming platforms. Tonight's program is brought to you in part by Wellington Brewery's Telus Lager, Deadly Grounds Coffee, Twisted Teas, and of course Canada's #1 genre film company, Black Fawn Distribution. You wanted the best. Well, they didn't make it, so here's what you get.
It's really not that bad.
You are going to hell.
Here's your host, Benner from Black Fawn Distro.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Black Fawn Distro's Takeover Tuesday. I'm your host, Benner, like the intro said, and of course, we're broadcasting live to Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube, and of course, rebroadcasting to all the major streaming platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Please like, follow, share, and subscribe wherever you can, and whatever platform you're listening to us on, please feel free. If you're listening live, please feel free to leave a comment below, and we are going to get to your questions and comments throughout the show. Quick shout out to our sponsors. We've got Wellington Brewery's Telus Lager, Deadly Grounds Coffee, of course, and as well as Twisted Teas. Couldn't do this show without them. And listen, we've got a great audience tonight, and I couldn't be more pumped for our guest. I'm, of course, talking about executive editor of Rue Morgue Magazine. In the house tonight, Andrea Subissati. And of course, we're going to be talking about all things horror, including a whole host of questions about and topics, including how Canadian horror still impacts and influences the rest of the globe. And, you know, we'll get to talking about, I don't know, Clive Barker. We'll be talking about maybe some George A. Romero stuff. And of course, I'll be asking some questions about the legendary Rue Morgue Manor, and which you're going to want to hear some of these stories because they're really, really cool. And as well, I've got Andrea in the green room right now. She's giving me the thumbs up. I think everything's good to go. And we're going to get to a whole, like I said, a bunch of stuff. Please, as I mentioned, if you want to follow us on Instagram, if you're listening live on Facebook or YouTube or any of the other platforms, please feel free to share the stream. Please share the link, and we'll try and maximize the audience tonight for Andrea and see if we can get as many people tuning in as possible and get as many hard-hitting questions as we can. Of course, Andrea does a lot of interviewing herself. We're flipping the table, so to speak, and putting her on the other side, and we're going to get to some good stuff coming up. Anyway, as I mentioned, we've got I'm going to stop talking. I'm talking too much. Had too much Deadly Grounds coffee today, but that's all good. Of course, enough from me. You guys know the drill. Before we get to Andrea, we got to hit the news.
Top story. Top story.
We'll give you the world. We'll give you the world.
This may be the most important decision of your life.
Can't stand the heat. Stay out of the kitchen.
Any special message for all the kids watching at home?
You can't stand the heat. Stay out of the kitchen.
Top story.
And remember, we care. We care.
There are certain inherent risks that come with the territory.
Top story. Top story.
We'll give you the world.
Top story.
Okay, and we're back with another edition of the news. Of course, as you can see, I have changed my hat, my news hat. It's way too hot outside. And of course, our top story is that winter, I think, is over. I think it's safe to say that. I know we said that about 4 weeks ago, and of course, it was snow again. But listen, I think summer is here. That's our top story. And of course, to go along with that top story of summer being here is that the fact that, yes, Vicious Fun is available now. It's available on Blu-ray as well as and available on Shudder. So if you have either Shudder, you can check it out there for free if you have a subscription, of course. And it is on Blu-ray, courtesy of Black Fawn Distribution, and that's available across the country in Sunrise Records locations as well as Cinema One locations, and also through our website, which is blackfawndistribution.com. Of course, we do have our special Blacklist edition still available. There are a few copies left. We sold a couple today, so I do believe that there's only a few left. But if you are a Blacklist member, please reach out. You do get a discount if you've bought one of our Blacklist packages before. You get 25% off every other Blacklist package we ever put out for the rest of time. Pretty good deal, right? So if you have a if you have a membership already, you can get that 25% off. But if you get the Blacklist package for Vicious Fun, you'll receive 25% off every other future Blacklist package going forward. So a pretty good deal. I'll throw it just up on the screen here. This is our Blacklist package. And if you were paying attention online, Rue Morgue, how about this for a tie-in? Recently ran a contest for this as well. So hopefully you guys entered into the contest. You can you had your chance to win one of these packages, which is, of course, includes a whole host of things, including signed copies of the Blu-ray, includes a limited edition VHS style slipcase, and then we've got collector chopsticks. There's a Bob Neese chameleon kit. There's a VHS sticker. There's an iron-on patch from a bunch of friends, and of course, anytime you buy one of our Blacklist packages, you can actually get you'll be supporting not just one Canadian company, you'll be supporting many. Most of the things that we have manufactured, we use small Canadian businesses that are in the horror community as well. So hey, you'll feel good about yourself when you do that. So order one today. Moving on, we've got our event coming up. Of course, I'm talking about Niagara Falls Comic-Con. It's happening on June 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Niagara Falls. It's going to be going down at the Niagara Falls Convention Center, and this is a fun event. Of course, we've got a lot of friends that we just saw at Shockstock. Can't wait to see them and hook up with them again in Niagara Falls. Make sure you check this out. It's a pretty great convention, and of course, we'd be remiss if we said we weren't excited to see our American friends too. Hopefully they can pop across the border and we can see them as well. And of course, Niagara Falls is great because they do 2 conventions every year. And we've just got word that Frightmare in the Falls is also happening in October, so late October. It's another horror themed convention, so it's all horror, which is pretty cool. We will be going to that one as well. So Black Fawn Distribution, bringing the Black Fawn Distribution bar to both of these events. I can't wait to get down there. So moving right along, of course, it wouldn't be a news update if we didn't have a Black Fawn Distro fried chicken sandwich report. That's where I go out and eat a fried chicken Sammy and tell you how good it is. And of course, this week we went out to beautiful Cambridge, Ontario, and we went to Fast Eddie's. Here's a photo of me just in the top left corner there of me enjoying a Fast Eddie's Chicken Eddie. It's not bad. It's just a chicken sandwich, really. It's not really like a classic traditional fried chicken sandwich. It's more of just a chicken patty. But hey, listen, I can't fault them for trying. It's $3.49, so it's a great price. It's like a snack sandwich. So if you're on the go and you just want to grab something and you want chicken instead of like burger meat, then I'd suggest this one. It's not too bad. It also comes with a tasty sauce called Ed's Famous Mac Sauce, which I am a big fan of. It actually got a whole half a star extra put onto this rating just because it's got Ed's Famous Mac Sauce. I'm going to tell you a little secret out there, everyone. If you've got something that you make, just put the word famous in front of it, and people will take notice. They'll be interested to try that at your next potluck. So anyway, so I'm going to give this kind of a quick, generous 3 out of 5. So doesn't quite make our list, doesn't make our top standings list, but 3 out of 5, not too bad. Good price, decent little sauce, little snack sandwich that you can get at Fast Eddie's. And I love Fast Eddie's too, because it's like a classic feel, sort of like drive-through burger joint. And also in Cambridge, they got this picnic bench outside, and you can sit in the sun and eat your sandwich. So let's take a look at the standings. Of course, we still have Coco Chicken leading at number 1. At a 3-way tie for number 1, along with Royal Electric. Their buttermilk fried chicken sandwich, which is also excellent. And Tall Tree Sandwich Co. in Hamilton. We haven't found that 3-way tie. They're all 4.5 out of 5. We haven't found a perfect 5 out of 5 chicken sandwich yet, but we're looking for one. So if you've got a recommendation or you've got a suggestion, please hit us up hit us up on Instagram, drop us a line at takeover@blackfawndistribution.com, and we'll try and get out there. As long as it's not 100,000 miles away, we'll do our best to try and hit it up, and hopefully we can find that elusive white whale 5 out of 5 fried chicken sandwich. And of course, why the hell do we review these fried chicken sandwiches in the first place?
It just tastes so damn good.
That's right. Now, moving on, let's talk about our guest tonight. As I mentioned earlier, our guest tonight is executive editor of Rue Morgue Magazine. I'm, of course, talking about Andrea Subissati, who is at the forefront of everything horror, especially Canadian horror. She has a vast wealth of knowledge. So let's hit the resume here. Originally hailing from our nation's capital of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, Andrea moved to Toronto in 2011. So she's been here for just over a decade. And she quickly emerged once she got here as one of the most prominent voices in Canadian horror, and a real role player in the Canadian horror community. In addition to her role as the editor of Rue Morgue Magazine, Andrea is also an accomplished writer in her own right, as well as a podcast host, lending her vast knowledge and her unique voice to the various shows found throughout the Rue Morgue's extended media network. When she's not managing the country's biggest horror publication, Andrea's never found too far away from her partner in crime / best office helper ever. I'm, of course, talking about her dog, Dante of the Dead, who has their own Instagram as well. So please follow Dante as well. We'll try and get something up during the podcast as well. So, of course, from global horror mags to personalized dog tags, the one and only Andrea Subissati is in the house, and she's live on the other side. And we'll get to chatting with her right after this.
Need a ride?
As far as I can.
Hop in.
This is what you said to me. A group of serial killers attending a 12-step meeting tried to kill me and my accomplice before disappearing, leaving us with 3 dead bodies?
No, 2 dead bodies.
It's one word, right? Bullshit.
Sorry to interrupt your meeting.
Thanks so much for coming out. How do you maintain your lifestyle and keep your urges under control?
I murdered the same victim repeatedly.
Just give me a mask.
Have you ever bitten into a kidney?
What is this, some kind of support group for serial killers?
Why are you here? It's complicated.
I thought you had our little group sessions on lockdown. Are you Skinner, a slicer dicer, or a corpse humper?
How did you get in here?
I got drunk at the bar. I passed out in a closet for a few hours, okay?
911.
Yes. Oh my God, it's horrible.
Now, Bonnie told me that people are coming here to try and kill him. And maybe us.
What? Us? Why? Tony! Quarter!
It got really messy. I like it messy sometimes.
Smack in the face. I'm like a coiled snake.
Gentlemen, we are about to have a lot of fun tonight.
Hey, I didn't even gag.
Okay, and we're back. We're live. And of course, I'm here on the air with my guest tonight, Andrea Subissati from Rue Morgue. Andrea, how are you, my friend? Thank you so much for being on the program. I wanted to have you on for so long.
Oh, my pleasure. It's so good to see you, Benner. And there's Dante saying hello. He has a thing with the word hello. If I answer the phone, if I start a conversation, if I start an interview, he's running to the door right now because he thinks I just greeted somebody who's going to enter our house. And
I will do my best not to mention the WALK word, or just so he doesn't get too excited. But I figured that might happen, so I put him in the intro just in case.
Nice. He appreciates that. He appreciates all of your Instagram hits. He's
Well,
Insta famous.
Yeah, dog famous, right? So listen, I can appreciate how busy you are with everything going on. You're the executive editor of Rue Morgue Magazine, and so of course, I mean, thanks for making the time for our show. And again, thanks to all our audience members for tuning in. Of course, if you got a question for Andrea or something you want us to discuss or whatever, please hit us in the comments below on whatever platform you're listening on to right now. And we'll try and get to them throughout the night. I know we've got a couple pouring in right now. Of course, I'd be remiss not to mention the Spinsters of Horror, of course, friends of the show. Just a quick ow coming in. And and then of course, I guess we've got a thing here just saying, Clark Kent almost got found out as Superman at Niagara Falls. I think that's a true story, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway, and of course, our other friend of the show, Carolyn. Hey, Andre, hi, Andrea and Dante. Mix those up a bit therefore. But anyway, let's get into talking about this because you are extremely busy. You wear a lot of hats, of course, with a publication like this, and it takes a lot of dedication. But tell us, can you give us the rundown of the history of the magazine for those out there who don't know, and how you got involved with it? And now you're kind of steering the ship, right? Like walk us through that kind of that history lesson, because I think that
I still can't believe it. It's been 5 years since I've been editor, and actually I moved to Toronto from Ottawa. I didn't move here for Rue Morgue, but I moved here because Toronto had a horror scene and Ottawa kind of didn't. And I figured, being close to Rue Morgue, being close to TIFF, being closer to, that industry would help me get to wherever it was I was going to wind up. I never really had a very linear career aspiration. So I actually moved to Toronto after wrapping up my master's degree in Ottawa, upon which I wrote on zombie films. And so my master's thesis got published as a book, and I had Rue Morgue sponsor my book launch party, which is how I met them. And then, from there, I got to know Rodrigo Gudino, who is the founder and the president of Rue Morgue. And as I got to know him, I got to know the magazine better and kind of, how he started the magazine, why he started the magazine. And the reason he started the magazine was because at the time, there wasn't a print fan magazine that covered all aspects of the genre, from films to books to comic books to music. Horror fans live and breathe this shit. It's everywhere. It's in our clothes. It's in our housewares. It's in what we name our impossibly cute dog. And so that was Rodrigo's vision for the magazine. And so the first couple of issues were just, he put them together in his dorm. He photocopied them in black and white, and he gave them out for free. He sent them out anywhere he thought horror fans went and would be interested in reading them. He didn't start charging for Rue Morgue until issue 3, when he got a call and somebody said, "Hey, I'd like to buy your back cover." So that's the origin story of the magazine, which I love. There's something very pure and punk rock and independent about it. And I love that Rodrigo is, he's still helming the ship. He's not the editor anymore, but I do work closely with him. And, I consider it really important to maintain his vision, that we cover all aspects of the genre and especially stuff that our readers might have missed otherwise.
Well, one of the cool things about it is that so the first issue was put out in 1997. Mm-hmm. So you're coming up in 25 years, which is crazy for anything, right?
Anything at all, much less a
anything
print
at all.
magazine.
Print magazine coming out of a pandemic. Yeah. Lots of other issues, including supply chain issues and all the stuff that as small business owners or anybody in the arts is now aware of, if you weren't aware of it 3 or 4 months ago. What keeps you going? As far as the magazine's very homegrown. It's now expanded into this sort of it's definitely a national juggernaut as far as it's the only magazine of its kind in Canada that has the reach that you do. And also, it's got a really, really unique voice to it. It's, of course, you're going to make the compare. We just played Vicious Fun, obviously, when we were doing the movie. The reference to Vicious Fanatics, which is the fake magazine, is obviously just a little bit of a shout out to Fangoria. But I mean, that's really the only magazine that is sort of comparable to, at least in North America. I know there's some others, but you do have a unique voice inside the magazine that's different than anything else. And where does that come from? And how does that get put together?
I mean, the unique voice, I think it has to do with, like, there's Rue Morgue's mission statement. There's Rue Morgue's origin story that I just told you. But we've gotten through a couple of editors, and I think horror fans, our love for the genre really unites us. And I think, horror fans are still kind of outlaw culture, outsider culture. A lot of us are metalheads, not everyone. A lot of us have tattoos, not everyone. Like, we are a pretty heterogeneous group within our horror fandom. And so I think having gone through several editors and several different kind of attitudes that lead the magazine, yeah, that's not to say that everything I put in the magazine under my tenure is necessarily a story that I'm personally super duper excited about. It has to, at the very least, interest me. But I think my role at the head of the magazine is to provide something for everyone. So if the main cover story doesn't appeal to a certain reader, hopefully there's something else in there.
Mm-hmm. And also and gives you some variety as well, because you can change what's on the cover issue to issue. I know that if something doesn't necessarily connect or whatever, I know there's been, sometimes you put something on the cover and there's a subsection of horror fans that are just a little bit louder than everyone else and says, I can't believe they put that. Well, why would they put that on the cover? But it's just to keep that kind of variety going. How challenging was it for you to kind of jump into that role like 5 years ago? And like you said, you still can't believe it. It's been a few years. How did you, what was your first day like? Do you remember that? Do you remember like, okay, I'm going to be jumping into this role, and this is what I have to do. Like what's the workload like? What do you do on the day to day, and how has that changed over the years maybe?
Okay. That's a big question.
Yeah. Well, break it down. I guess.
Yeah, I got
however you want to answer.
I got you. So, I had stayed friends with Rodrigo. Prior to working with Rue Morgue, I started the Black Museum horror lecture series. I started the Faculty of Horror podcast. I was playing roller derby at the time, and I was putting on all these fundraising events for my roller derby team. So I think through that, I was able to demonstrate to Rod that I was hyperactive, and that I couldn't sit still for 5 seconds, and I always have to be doing something. And he always said eventually, like, one day we're going to work together. So Rue Morgue actually initially brought me in as office manager, and so I had an admin role for a good 4 years before I became editor. And when that happened, it was at a stage in the company's development where we had to pare back our staff. And so when I stepped into the role, it was kind of a different role than it was for the previous editor-in-chief. And that was a different role from the one before that. You know what I mean? I feel like every editor of Rue Morgue kind of has their chapter, and and it's hard to really compare and contrast. And indeed, like I was saying before, attitudes and values between editors differ. And I think the demographic who read Rue Morgue, we've got our diehard fans who stay with us throughout, but some are going to drop off. We're going to bring some new ones in, and that's just kind of part of the game. But right now, it's just me at the Rue Morgue Manor. The office manager that we have is part-time. She comes in once a week. So it's mostly just me and Dante. It's really quiet around here, which is crazy because 10 years ago when I used to visit the old Rue Morgue House of Horror, the funeral home. Do you remember it better?
So I never went to the funeral home, but Chad has, because that was the Rue Morgue mansion, right?
That was the Rue Morgue House of Horror.
House of Horror. This
is the Rue Morgue Manor. We haven't had a mansion yet.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that'll be next.
Okay, I was misinformed from and you can guess from who, but yeah, yeah. I mean, it's I've been to the manor, and it's awesome, and I remember we went there. This was a few years ago, and we showed up, and we were like, "You're yeah, just come on over." It's such a cool place because it's everything that you would think of as a horror fan is in this one sort of giant, I don't know what you would call it. It's almost like a compound now, right?
Okay, that works.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an office. It's my home. We definitely have a party room. We've got lots of administrative stuff, lots of envelopes. We're still making magazines, but also a lot of art and memorabilia. We have a crazy DVD and Blu-ray collection. Yeah, a lot of junk. A lot of junk I inherited, but also a lot of really cool shit too. And Benner, next time you're next time you're in the neighborhood, there is a place about 2 blocks away that makes a killer fried chicken sandwich. I think it might actually take that 5-star spot.
Oh, really?
And I would be so honored to be the one to introduce that to you. Yeah.
Okay, we're in. Yeah, for sure. We're coming over. Now that's a great segue because I'm probably going to be there anyway. You've got the Rue Morgue 4th annual Spooky Flea Market coming up, which is on June 11th, I believe, and that happens sort of like in the outside part of the building. Talk to us about that. Like, how did it? It's nice to see events come back online. I always love talking about them. We just went to Shock Stock a couple of weeks ago, and it was just like so interesting to see everyone and just be like, wow, like, and how much, is everyone okay? And does everyone look older now? And like everyone emerges, everyone emerges from their caves, I guess. Yeah. But how excited are you to have this project come back, or this event come back online? And what can you tell us about it?
I am so excited. I love this event. This event is 100% a labor of love. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of stress in that when you're planning an outdoor event and you can't control the elements, that's always kind of a really stressful thing. So every single year that I do this, it calls for 50% chance rain, and I have to make the call and let all the vendors know whether or not it's going forward on that day or on the rain date. But God, I crave stress, I guess. I'm addicted to it. I don't know what to say. The Spooky Flea Market was, I was saying before that this place is full of junk. And when I say junk, I mean, like, it's not stuff I want to put on the curb. It'll be a poster of an obscure horror movie that is signed by the filmmaker to Rue Morgue, but it's been badly treated, so it's dog-eared and fucked up. And I'm like, this is going to mean something to someone. I don't want to throw it on Buns or eBay or something like that. I should sell it as a flea market. I'll just have a flea market. I'll just sell everything that I don't want in the basement for super cheap. And all the horror fans in Toronto can come out and bring their own tables and sell their own junk too. So I made a Facebook event page, and then I recorded my podcast with Alex West. And so I didn't come back to it until 4 hours later. And it was like, 2,000 people are coming. And I was like, oh.
Perfect.
I can't accommodate this many people. I don't have permits, or like I thought that this was just going to be a little bullshit thing, but it ballooned. And so I procured a partner to help me organize it. And in the first 3 years that we were doing it every year, like, we started having a food truck, we started having more entertainment. It kind of grew in scope. And then, of course, due to the pandemic, we took 2020 off. In 2021. So this is the first time in 2 years. And I'm really excited. Like, it's such a unique event. And I don't even think I knew what it was going to be like until we did it. Like, I don't think it was until after we were tearing down the first time that I was like, horror fans don't actually have a whole lot of opportunity to get together in the light of day, out in the sunshine, bring their kids, bring their dog, an event that's free to attend and just wander around. There isn't really anything like it.
Well, that's the big thing too, is that it's free. It's also low cost for vendors to come out too. So if you go through the the application process and get chosen, it's very, very low cost. So it allows people to kind of come out and make a few bucks, and especially with all the pricing of everything, gas, and even just people's time, right? To take the time off work or take the time off out of their weekend to come down, like, it's worthwhile. And that's not a slight on the bigger conventions. They're just different animals for sure, but you never know. Like, you can run into problems where you're like, how are we going to, like, as a vendor, like, it'd be nice to clear some stuff today because, that helps their businesses keep going. So I love this event too. I was supposed to run our booth the one time, and I couldn't make it. And had a bit of an emergency come up, so I wasn't able to make it out. So I'm coming this year, hopefully. And this will be my first time, not my first time at the Manor, but my first time at the Spooky Flea Market, which is, I'm really pumped for, because this was a thing like a couple of years ago where I was like, I'm coming here every year and it's going to be awesome. And I noticed that you lured me in with the hope of a fried chicken sandwich. So I'll be there for sure, even if it's raining. But yeah, and then for anyone tuning in from the States, I mean, we talk about that because we live in Canada, and so for some reason in June, which you would think would be like record high temperatures and really nice weather, we get that kind of like maybe 3/4 of the time. The rest of the time it rains or it's windy or it's overcast or whatever. So, but here's hoping. Knock on wood. Let's hope for great weather on June 11th, and yeah, everyone come down. What's the how do people get there if they're in the city or just outside?
Oh my God. One thing I can always count on is people messaging me and being like, where can I park? And I'm like, well, we're holding the event in our parking lot, so can't help you there. I think public transit is really the best way to go. And we are right on the Dufferin bus, which is it still the worst bus in the city?
I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever taken that one.
Oh, okay. Because I know that for a while, the Dufferin bus was kind of like legendary for being like the shittiest bus to have to take next to College. No, College is a streetcar. That can't be it. Or maybe that's the worst streetcar and Dufferin is the worst bus. Anyway, the only reason everybody hates it is because it's Dufferin Street. So it's busy and there's traffic, but I still think it's the best way to get there. And it'll take you right to our door.
Yeah, and if anything, you'll get into a little bit of an adventure in Toronto, and that's always that's
part of the
always
experience.
exactly. You want the real thing. You don't want the touristy thing. You want to come do the real thing, right? So, listen, we got a lots of great people tuning in tonight. So, just want to get to a couple of quick questions as well, or quick comments. Just from Carolyn. She's piping. I used to live around the old Rue Morgue funeral home / crematorium in my crypt.
It was a crematorium. It was a funeral home, Benner. Like we used to have, there was a chapel with pews and we had a projector set up and we would do screenings there. I'm saying it was before my time, but I did get to go a couple of times. It was so fucking cool.
Awesome. Spencer's a horse saying Spooky Flea, take all my money. Gladly, no problem. We'll be there. I'm sure. I never know who's posting on this. I always assume it's Kelly.
Me too.
So Kelly, thanks for tuning in tonight. And if it's Jessica, thanks, Jess. And of course, and then we've got a chicken sandwich with a side of ketchup chips. Haven't tried that. I usually don't get the side. I usually get mac and cheese because I like to try it if it's there. But yeah, I'm just kind of I just go right to the sandwich. That's what I want to try. I want to try and find the perfect fried chicken sandwich, right? So anyway,
there's some good ones in the city. I feel like the fried chicken sandwich is having a moment. Have you tried PG Clucks? Have you tried that one?
So I have tried PG Clucks, but before I started doing this thing, and I don't know why I started doing that. I was just like, for some reason during the pandemic, I got I was always a cheeseburger guy. And for some reason, and I don't know how this happened, I just stopped eating cheeseburgers and started eating fried chicken sandwiches. Like on the regular, and then I was like, I should just do a little review. We should try and find the best one because there's a debate in town. But yes, no, sorry. Long story short, I have tried PG Clucks.
I think it's G, yeah, like rated PG.
Because it's right beside the Royal.
Because it's right beside the Royal. That's probably the only reason I've been there.
But I haven't tried. So I have to come down and try that as well. So I might have to make a chicken sandwich weekend at some point. So. But anyway, enough about my horrible dietary habits, but so in addition to everything you're doing, you mentioned that you're doing podcasting, you mentioned that you do a lot of interviews, you obviously host a whole range of shows on on Rue Morgue TV, which is your YouTube channel. How did you get involved with that? Was that always something that you were looking to kind of dive into in addition to writing for the magazine? Or was that something that came later and you just kind of grabbed it and went with it?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't think I ever had an interest in being on camera. I think, for people who take to writing, it's because they appreciate having the amount of control you do over your words. You're able to make yourself heard and understood. And if it doesn't come out right the first time, you go back and edit and you can make it perfect. And so I think for a writer, I actually get pretty nervous speaking off the cuff the way I am now, because I don't have quite as much control over my output. I could stammer, I could say the wrong thing, I could make a mistake that's not fact checked or whatever. And when I started the podcast, it was 2012. That's another big anniversary. Is the Faculty of Horror is going to be 10 years this December, which is insane. And it's insane to think that podcasts have been around that long and like that they've blown up the way they have. But that adventure started with.
Oh, I think we might
I
have
was a guest on the.
Oh, there we go. I think you're cutting out just a little bit there. So.
Oh no.
I think we're okay. No, I think you're good. You're good. Keep going.
You can see in the playback that I'm like frozen, like.
That's live TV. I know. I don't know why I do live TV, but
see? This is why I'm a writer. When you're writing, this doesn't happen.
It's like extra pressure. So maybe I'm addicted to it as well. But
yeah,
you never know what can happen.
Gotta try and freeze in a good face.
Yeah. Yeah, just never blink.
Anyway,
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
So yeah, I started the podcast with Alex West 10 years ago. And, at first we really liked how, our faces weren't on it. And in fact, I believe still to this day on our website, our contact thing has us wearing masks because podcasting was such a great way to, have your voice heard without your face is, like for women who want to talk about horror movies, it kind of means a lot to be heard and not be judged on our appearances and stuff like that. So,
right.
So that was kind of built into the fabric of why we started the Faculty of Horrors, that it's a way to be heard and it's a way to be totally independent. And, after a couple of years, it started doing really well. And of course, now we're doing live shows. Now you can see our faces and stuff. But yeah, and I never super had an interest in being on camera. I think it's just something that comes with the territory of having a role like I do. And after a while, you just kind of embrace it.
Yeah. And then of course the from that kind of offshoots all of these shows that you have on YouTube, which people can check out. We'll make sure we throw the link down in the YouTube description as well, which links to the channel, so people can kind of easily check that stuff out as well. But like, how is that production process for all of those shows? Like, how does that happen? And because I think a lot of people that tune in sometimes are running their own podcasts or running their own sort of outlet for horror or what they want to talk about. Like, how has that grown, and like how has that become its own other kind of beast, right?
Well, I'm thrilled to hear that. Like, again, it's been several years that we've been doing Rue Morgue TV, but I feel like it was just yesterday that we had this idea. Let's start putting out more content. Let's start reaching a bit more into the digital space. So we shoot maybe every other month here at the Manor. And that's when we shoot all my promos, the little bumpers that go at the beginning of the episodes. Right. And, we've kind of called in friends of the magazine, staff of the magazine to come in and do an episode. I think our earliest episodes were we had an advice column with our columnist Lance, who is known spectacularly not only for his appetite for terrible movies, but just really bad life choices. So the idea of him giving advice is hysterical. He was an early show. What else? We brought Yasmina in to do her VHS column in video form, and she's amazing. Yasmina, of course, from the Witchfinger podcast. Her energy is unmatched, and it's amazing. And then nowadays, I think some of our most popular shows include Terror Tarot, where we've got like a Rue Morgue intern who is really into tarot cards. It starts talking about horror movies that address tarot, and then she kind of evaluates whether or not they did it right. What else? Alex West has a new show on Rue Morgue TV called Sympathy for the Sequel, where she chooses a franchise and she looks up the lowest rated entry of that franchise, and she watches it and tries to come up with some nice things to say about it and give it some love. So I feel like Rue Morgue TV programming has developed very organically in terms of, people are responding to this and our participants are enjoying doing it. So we're going to keep on doing it. And of course, over the COVID, we couldn't always have everybody come to the Manor to shoot. So we started accepting submissions, people recording on their own and submitting that. But yeah, it's been really fun. I'm glad to hear you like it.
Yeah, no, it's great. And in just the it's very personal. It's like the videos are very personal, and it's easy to kind of get connected to the hosts of the shows and figure out, like, I haven't actually watched the sequel show, and that's like right up my alley. So
You gotta check it out.
I'm putting that on my list for sure. Because there's a lot of questionable sequels made, and sometimes they're, well, sometimes the rating is right and sometimes it's wrong, right? But how do you see that? Like, has that, of course, I mean, again, we started off talking about Rue Morgue being a print magazine. It's still a print magazine, but how's the you guys forging into the digital space as far as digital subscriptions? How's that changed over the last couple of years? Like, are you noticing it coming back? Is it like give us the rundown of how that's sort of developed, I guess, unexpectedly, maybe, from essentially 2020 onward.
2020 onward, it was tricky. It was tricky in a number of respects. So Rue Morgue, obviously we have our subscribers, and so our subscribers receive the magazine straight from the printer. It's printed, enveloped, straight to subscribers. And then there's distribution, and that's like Chapters and Barnes and Noble that carry the magazine. So when the pandemic first hit and all the stores were closed, all the distributors who would buy tens of thousands of magazines were like, oh, we're not getting those anymore because the stores are closed. And we were kind of like, shit, well, we printed them. So that was kind of the start of the headache. The second headache was that all the movies that were coming out were postponed. And I always try to, put stuff in the magazine timed along with their release so that people can see what it is we're talking about in the magazine. But, as a result, I've got Candyman on the cover almost a year and a half before it came out. We put The Sadness on the cover like this time last year, and it's only hitting Shudder now. So that was kind of a headache. And now that the pandemic it's not quite over. Now we're dealing with supply shortages. And so, I've got the May-June issue of the magazine right here. And subscribers might notice that this guy feels a little bit different than last issue. And that's just because, supplies are weird and we're having to go with what paper stock is available. But in terms of Rue Morgue staying alive in the digital age, I mean, obviously the internet hit print media hard, and it was something that we all had to reckon with. But I think Rue Morgue has always had such a high standard of artwork in our covers, which makes them really collectible and really coveted. And I feel like people really want to have it in paper. If they give a shit about Rue Morgue at all, they don't give a shit about the digital edition. They want the paper. They want to collect it. They want to feel it. They want to admire it. And so, we're upholding that standard and still putting like a really high priority on print quality, image quality, and the most beautiful covers we can manage.
And you're up to, I think it's 206 issues now in total. How hard is it to get issue 1, 2, and 3?
Funny you should say. To get 1, 2, and 3 separately, impossible. Good luck. Rodrigo doesn't even have a copy. You know what? Actually, I have a copy here at the manor, but it's mounted behind plastic and you can't have it. But,
like the Constitution and like in National Treasure.
Totally. Nobody touches that. But we did a special issue many years ago where it's issues 1, 2, and 3 combined like in a this size magazine, and that is available on the shop. Yeah, it's like a collector's edition, so you can read it, and it's kind of redesigned, but that's the only way you can get it.
Do you know how, like, have you seen a back issue, like a hard to find back issue of Rue Morgue, like at a ridiculous price? Like, have you had any experiences with those where you're like, oh my God, this is like...
I haven't had that, but what I have had is, that humongous vintage store in Hamilton on Ottawa Street. It's like 4 floors of vintage goodness.
I don't, but
you're such a boy.
I'm gonna go suss that out, I guess.
It's the fucking best.
Listen, I'm the Black Fawn guy that doesn't live in Hamilton. All right, so talk to the other guys. They're supposed to be filling me in of what's going on over there.
They have to take you there. It's insane. It's so great. And there's a couple of like horror stalls where you'll see like a good VHS collection or some figurines or stuff like that. I don't collect that shit, but I know people do. But in a horror stall, I saw a whole bunch of Rue Morgues selling for like $5 a piece that I know are rare and that I know are out of print and are worth much more than that. So I haven't seen them selling for a ton. I've seen them like undersold for way too little, and I'll just buy them. And
awesome. And of course, anyone out there who does collect or is looking to get into collecting, I know as myself as a collector, I'm always looking for something new to feed feed that monster that's inside me. But you can buy the back catalog issues. I believe it's because of how many you print and that sort of stuff, and obviously how many you sell. I think it's issue 150 onwards. I think you can purchase back issues on the website.
Those are the ones that we have enough stock to warrant it being a listing online. But if you're looking for a back issue that's very rare, give us a shout. Maybe we've got it kicking around in the basement.
Behind glass, buried under bricks and mortar, right? But you have to John Wick it up out of the ground. But so speaking of the covers, like I know one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about was just Canadian horror. And I know you're well versed in all things horror, from around the globe. But specifically for Canadian stuff, I remember especially recently with Possessor coming out, and you guys did a really, really great, fantastic cover for that film. And that's a movie that I was like, Canadian horror has such a weird, odd tinge to it. Like it doesn't feel, and I've talked to a lot of people. We were just talking about this on the last podcast, was that people have told me that Canadian horror has a feel to it that's very different if you're on the outside of Canada, and therefore if you're in the inside and you might be a little too close to it, maybe you don't notice it. But people have said it's got a style, it's got a vibe, it's got a feel to it. Canadian horror in general, like, what are your thoughts on it? I don't want to, you can answer this however you want. I don't mean to make this a huge broad question as far as like, oh my God, we're gonna be talking about this for half an hour, but how important is Canadian horror? Like, what role does it play in the film market or in the global horror community, as far as like how important is Canadian film to that part of, I don't know, like part of pop culture, I guess.
It's a really big question, and it's a really interesting question, because I feel like I'm often kind of called upon, if not directly in an interview like this, but like in a gig or a feature, or an article I'm writing, or in an interview, to essentialize Canadian horror. And I have a really hard time doing that. And I often wonder if it's because I'm too close to it, or if it's because, I'm inclined to these weird stereotypes that are tied to when I was studying horror in the academic setting. And of course, we talk a lot about the tax shelter era. We talk a lot about Cronenberg. We talked about how horror thrived in Canada because of this government intervention that made it so. And I do believe that to a certain extent that is still the case. Is Canada has many, many flaws, but they do kind of still give a fuck about their art, and there are grants to be had that allow organizations like Rue Morgue, and I'm sure Black Fawn, to thrive. We do have support, we have TIFF, we have institutions, and we believe it's important to foster our own art. Now, when I think of Canadian art, I always think of fucking Margaret Atwood. And, she was talking about how like American cinema, or no, she was talking about literature. She was talking about American literature is categorized by the frontier, and they see everything as a frontier. And that kind of informs all of their, the Western movies, the heroes, the epics that came out of the US. And in the UK, it was the island, or something. I might even be misquoting. But in Canada, it was the wilderness and the garrison mentality. You might have you heard of the garrison mentality?
I haven't myself, no.
Her point was kind of that Canada was so wild and wildernessy that that Canadians have had to fortify themselves against the wild, and as a result, our fiction is very contained. And kind of has to do with living with people within a certain really contained context. And I think that's interesting. I think that's part of the story. But I also know that Canada has a lot of cultural cringe to deal with, just kind of due to our history. We are independent, but we are also, still kind of tied to the Queen and tied to the Crown. We don't have this rebellious rock and roll history that the US kind of has. And so I don't know about you, Benner, but for myself, growing up Canadian, Canadian content was always kind of lesser than, Canadian stuff on the radio was kind of rammed down our throats. Like Degrassi rules. There was a lot of good shit back then, but I remember watching commercials on American TV and being like, oh, I want that soft drink. I want to watch that Nickelodeon, whatever, that we couldn't get here. And I don't feel that way at all anymore. There's nothing that I want that Canadians can't have. And indeed, we're producing a lot of what it is that scratches my itch anyway.
Yeah. I mean, no, I'd agree. Like, I think everything just took longer to get everywhere too. So, I mean, I grew up in like rural Ontario. So when something popped off in like some city in the States, like it took forever to get to us. Right. So, I think that was the same with a lot of films and not necessarily bigger horror stuff because it had the distribution channels and the release schedules and all that stuff, but like lesser known stuff. Like I remember, like I always have this conversation about Evil Dead, right? And it's like your appreciation of Evil Dead depends on or how you appreciate it depends on how you watch the films. And I only got to like Army of Darkness, like Army of Darkness showed up and I was like, whoa, I gotta watch that. And it was like hilarious. And then we found out about Evil Dead 2. And it was just like, that was just the way it happened when we were kids. Right. So, or teenagers, I guess. So I think that it's, I don't know. I think like, I still feel like it's interesting to hear that Canada has its own vibe. That makes me super pumped because I know that, and the people from, it's usually we hear that from people from like Europe. So England, Germany, and they've said, yeah, like, like America just has this thing where it's like US stuff is like, it's got this really quick, choppy sort of editing, flashiness, Hollywood vibe to it. But you guys don't have that. And I'm wondering if that's because of decades of us having to sit through stuff and have the programs that we have in place to kind of like, it's produced this different sort of output, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, the tax shelter era was such a big part of the history of Canadian cinema and not just of horror cinema is that, there was an impression that horror is easier to make, horror is cheaper to make, and people were taking advantage of these tax credits. And then I think it's so interesting that like one of the greatest horror filmmakers to ever live, David Cronenberg, came out of this tax shelter era and the Canadian public kind of turned on him and was like, we don't want people making these kinds of movies with our tax dollars. And yet now he's kind of celebrated as the influential cultural giant that he is. And so, I feel like it's always, there's always a tension, and especially with something like horror where it's not for everyone. It's not super family friendly. Like, there's a reason you're not going to walk into Barnes and Noble and see Rue Morgue at the front. Sometimes our covers are pretty gory. Do you remember our cover for The Sadness? I wonder if I have it handy.
Yeah. So I haven't seen The Sadness yet, but I have heard it is fucking crazy.
It is fucking bananas. And actually, I'm hosting a watch party for it this Thursday. If anyone would like to attend, find Cult Rue Morgue on Facebook and join the Facebook group, and you can get more information about that. But The Sadness was made by a Canadian abroad.
Oh, really?
So, yes, I'd like you to follow up with, after you've seen it, you can tell me how Canadian you think that movie is.
Well, I don't know if I can tell. Like I can tell when stuff's Canadian, like when it's on the CBC. But when it's like Canadian films, I'm always just like, I don't know, can I tell that? But apparently it sticks out quite a bit. And I think it's something about us as Canadians that we're somewhat of a humble people, like the majority of us, like if you had to give us all a label altogether. And I think it's something where when we think about saying, wow, this is like really, this is Canadian horror. Like you mentioned, like it always seems to be like, is that label a little bit cheap, or is that label a little too pompous? Like, does it sound like we're trying to be like Italian horror, or, you know what I mean? Like, I wonder if, I don't know, we're kind of in a weird spot, and we're also neighbors to the States. So I think we're always influenced somehow by what's going on below us, right? And
big time. We're big time influenced by what goes on below us. And indeed, I feel like there's a lot of slippage between like Canadian and American productions, because a lot of big American horror productions come to film up here. Guillermo del Toro loves to film up here. It doesn't really make a film Canadian. So I think that's actually where independent films like Black Fawn films have the biggest role in essentializing what it means to be Canadian, because they were conceived and made in Canada, like authentically within Canada.
Yeah, and also Cronenberg. We should probably attach this to his resume. He's actually father of other awesome Canadian horror filmmakers too. So yeah, I always watch like his earlier work. I'm really interested to see his new flick. It's sorry, the future of what's it called? The future of I'm drawing a blank now. I'll have to find out.
I don't care what it's called. I love it already. It doesn't matter.
I read something today that said people will not like this movie in the first 5 minutes. Like you'll know if it's for you in the first 5 minutes, which is actually pretty interesting. So I'm hoping that. But he's been around forever. Like I remember being in school. I remember when Crash came out. And Crash, for all intents and purposes, is a horror movie in its own right. He's always been sort of like pushing the barriers and pushing the boundaries of what's kind of considered horror and almost what's considered Canadian film, right? Just because of the content he's sort of tackled.
And how nefarious it was. Yeah, he is like baked into the fabric of Canadian film history, no doubt.
So I have to look up this title because, and so while I'm doing this, I will say, yes, The Sadness is also coming out, I believe, as a physical release through Raven Banner.
Yes,
our friends at Raven Banner, which is pretty awesome. I know some details on that, but I don't know if they're I don't know if they're public yet. But all I'm going to say is it's probably going to be a release that if you're a horror film collector and love collecting physical media, it's going to be one that you're going to want to pick up for sure. But I'm not sure of the release date. And that just filled up enough time for me to tell you that yes, David Cronenberg's new film is called Crimes of the Future.
That's right. Which
is a great fucking title. I mean, even if you didn't know what that was, if you're at a film festival, you're like, I want to see that. It sounds sci-fi, might be horror, might be whatever. So we'll see how it goes. But I mean, I loved Possessor. Possessor was like, obviously his son directed it, but it had like it felt like a Cronenberg movie. I know that's weird to say, but it did have a holy shit moment in it where that I was like, I'd never seen anything like that in a film, and it really took my breath away. As far as like, it really caught me off guard, and it was really, really, really well done. So I don't know. I think the future of Canadian film looks good, like especially for horror stuff. But anyway, anything you want to add to that? I know. Yeah,
I think it's that Canadian filmmakers and creators no longer need to really feel that pull to go to LA to make it. That there is a film community in Canada, and you can make really cool films here and have wide distribution and have it look really good, and you don't have to leave anymore. Because remember when it felt like an exodus, like anybody who was talented went to the US to work?
Yeah, and you couldn't make it in anything unless you were in the US. And that went from like, I think that stemmed kind of like from Mike Myers and Jim Carrey and like all everything, all the Canadian comedians seemed to like not being they wouldn't make it in Canada, or they'd make it a little bit in Canada, and they'd reach the end of that road, and they'd have to go to New York, or they'd have to go to Chicago or LA, or to kind of make it to that next step. Is there anything you could see? Like, I mean, you've studied more than most people about Canadian film and that sort of. Is there anything that you can see as far as like how the Canadian industry could change for the better? Like, how could it give more? Like, how could it expand to sort of develop the Canadian film more than it already is, I guess?
I don't know. It's not really my expertise is policy. And like I said, I feel like things are moving. And indeed, like maybe I'm too close to it. Maybe I'm pseudo part of it. You're definitely part of it. I'm making my travel plans to go to Fantasia soon. TIFF is coming up. Like, it's a good time.
And that's why I'm asking, because I'm too close to it.
I think it's a great time to be interested in Canadian horror, and I think it's a great time to be a creative in Canadian horror. I've seen Black Fawn grow from teeny tiny to where you guys are now. Shucks.
I know. It's like we've left the nest, right?
And can I just embarrass you for a minute? Anyone who
100%.
meets Benner fucking loves Benner.
Oh,
Like, I don't know
thanks.
how many people in the world are named Ben, but there's only one Benner, and everybody, like, if you say Black Fawn, everyone's like, Benner is my guy.
Well, that's because someone named Benner does all the hard work around here, right?
It doesn't go unappreciated.
And I'm just saying that out loud to see if Chad's listening tonight, because he usually pops in and make sure I'm doing a good job. So no, you know what? Thanks so much for that. I really do appreciate that. And honestly, it's really just for me, it just stems from my love of talking about stuff. And when I was a kid, I just got into music and movies were the two things that I loved, and I couldn't get enough of it. Like, I could just consume as much as possible. And I've always had good times and good vibes and good experiences with horror. Like, it scared the shit out of me at some points in my life. It's also like I've had a lot of fun experiences, like going to the drive-in and renting movies, and it always seems to tie back to, and again, it's almost like a universally shared memory of doing stuff like that. So I love it. So when people come up to the booth or whatever, I just love talking. I just love shooting the shit. It's fun for me. So, but I appreciate that. Thanks.
It's important. It's important because, like, there are these institutions, like Rue Morgue is a company that makes magazines. The bare minimum I could do and still be doing my job is to make magazines. You work for Black Fawn, you do your job, but we are so passionate that we do stuff like this. We do stuff like the Spooky Flea Market. We do stuff like show up to the convention and give a shit and meet people. And, you know, to me, that's Canadian horror, is that there is a community and there is a scene, and it's a caring and embracing one.
The one thing, and I'll just share this with our audience too as well, is that the one thing when we started doing conventions, we all sat around, we said, we got to come up with just sort of a bit of not a plan, but just like, how are we gonna, you know, present ourselves in this kind of physical capacity where it's not just online, it's in person and stuff. And we just said, we just welcome everyone up to the table, and whoever wants to talk, we can talk to them and be interested in you know, what they have going on. We've met future filmmakers from there, from that sort of idea. And it's just kind of just, hey, you never know who you're going to meet. Right. Like, and it's not like don't judge every book by its cover. It's not that. It's just like, make time for people that are making time for you. That's the only way I can describe it. And it's always been a good thing that we've always kind of lived by that. And it's, yeah, like I said, I mean, we've met a lot of cool people. Some of those people work for us now, and like, you know, it's like, it's crazy how that thing happens. So I would say, anybody out there, you never know who you might meet. Always put on, always be nice to people that you meet for the first time. You never know who you might, what that might turn into. So anyway, speaking of stuff and questions and talking and all that stuff, listen, I didn't tell you about this, but we have a rapid fire section of the show. I know you've watched the show before, so this can't come as much of a surprise, but you are an interviewer. You do a lot of interviews, but I said we were going to flip the tables on you tonight. Are you good to go? Can you do a rapid fire?
Of course.
Okay, let's do it. All right. So, of course, this section of the show is brought to us by Wellington Brewery's Telus Lager. Of course, that's this fancy beer right here, which is produced in Guelph. Actually, it's brewed in Guelph, and it is from Wellington Brewery, which is the oldest microbrewery in Canada. And of course, I'm going to crack this because this is also
I can't find mine. I don't think it arrived in time. Benner, is it waiting at my door?
Oh yeah, it should be there soon. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I get the message.
Take a big sip. Tell us how delicious and refreshing it is. Go on. While I drink water like a chump.
Delicious. Well, this is kind of my halftime. This is my little reward as I kind of crushed and marched towards the end of the show. But yeah, for anyone out there, if you're looking to pick it up, check out Wellington Brewery. You can obviously swing by their brewery in Guelph, Ontario, or you can pick up some tins at your local LCBO or wherever you buy your adult beverages, like a bar or a pub or whatever. Anyway, Andrea, let's go. We got 5 questions for you. There are varying degrees of difficulty. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
I'm ready to suck.
Rapid fire number 1. I actually had to change this question on the fly, but will you said that before we got on the air, you said, you know what? I'm not a Marvel guy. So, you know, and I said, okay, fine. So here's your question. Yes or no. Will you eventually watch Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, if only because Sam Raimi directed it.
Yes.
It's worth watching. I don't want to get into a big debate about it, but
it
is kind of funny.
We lose so many filmmakers to comic book movies, and Marvel is just like, we need Sam Raimi in our genre. We need him here. You can't have him.
I will say this. So I went to see it on Thursday night, on opening night.
Yeah.
And I will say this. I had not seen a $200 million Evil Dead movie until I saw one on Thursday.
Stop it.
Yeah. And it's not. I'm not going to oversell it. It's not Evil Dead. I know there's a bunch of comments coming on. A bunch of people call me afterwards like, what are you talking about? But it's got it's got his fingerprints all over it. And you can see it's the Marvel blanket, but Sam Raimi's popping out of that blanket whenever he can and he puts his own stuff. It's funny to me because sequences in it were that's right from Evil Dead, directly from Evil Dead, and he snuck it into
okay.
So, but the movie itself,
you better come back. That's all I'm saying.
Fair enough.
Once he's tasted that big money.
Well, he already did Spider-Man. He came back, right?
Yeah, you're right. Well, you're right.
Yeah. So who knows? I want Drag Me to Hell too is what I want. But anyway, so let's move on. This is supposed to be rapid fire. I had a question. Guys, again, a shout out to a guy online who said his comment on YouTube was on one of our episodes was rapid fire. You might as well call that slow walk fire or something. Anyway, I just love that, giving that guy a shit. That's why I actually talk so much during this. Yeah, I know. So anyway, okay, here we go. Rapid fire question number 2. Okay. You got to pick one other than the first Hellraiser film.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Clive Barker film that he's been involved with?
Ooh, does Candyman count?
You could count Candyman. Absolutely.
I mean, I guess that's it. I rewatched Nightbreed for the first time in a long time, and it's rough.
It's batshit, eh?
Well, I mean, I love it. I just, it's so not sexy, and there's a lot of really unsexy sex.
David Cronenberg's in there too. It's a nice Canadian tie-in.
He rules. Oh my God. He's such a good actor. Every time he's in something, I'm like, man, he should be.
And apparently that mask was that was an influence on Corey Taylor from Slipknot. That's his new mask. Was influenced by that apparently. So yeah, there you go. David Cronenberg still giving back to the kids, right? Okay, so rapid fire number 3, memory game. Okay, so do you remember who or what was on the cover of the very first Rue Morgue issue that you worked on?
Yes. Oh, that I worked on? I remember my first issue as editor.
Okay, that counts. Sure.
It was American Gods. Do you remember the TV adaptation of American Gods?
Yes, absolutely.
It looked really good.
And do you remember the first issue that you worked on or you wrote for or anything like that?
I remember my first cover story for Rue Morgue was The Human Centipede 3, which again, not high art, not my favorite interview I've ever done, but it was my first cover story and I was really excited. The first review I ever wrote for Rue Morgue was actually you remember those little books we used to do? There was the 200 lesser known horror movies that you need to see. I wrote a blurb in that on Suicide Club, and that was my first time ever writing for the magazine, and I was chuffed.
Good use of the word chuff there, by the way. Okay, fair enough. So rapid fire question number 4, tell us more. Can you tell us the origin story of the amazing Clive Barker painting that hangs in the Rue Morgue Manor?
I can tell you what I know of that origin story. It was before my time, so that story has been passed around a couple of times, so who knows how accurately I have it. But once upon a time, Rue Morgue had a big chunk of Fan Expo Canada, and they called it the Festival of Fear. And Rue Morgue programmed all the guests for that. We organized everything. We would have offsite events, and then obviously a very big installment at the show. So Clive Barker was the guest of honor one year, and as far as I'm told it, he painted that motherfucker in his booth while he was standing there, and while fans were coming up to him and being like, "Hi, I'm a super fan. Here's my really annoying anecdote about the first time I saw Hellraiser, and it really scared me." And he was kind of like, "Cool, yeah, as he's painting. And like, you've been to a shit ton of those conventions, Ben, or like sometimes when it comes to a guest of honor, like a high echelon guest of honor, you'll see them for maybe 5 minutes. And that's after waiting in line for 20 and spending $100. But he painted that at his booth while he hung out with people all day. And then he fucking gave it to us.
That's awesome. And is that, I don't want to misquote you, but did you once say that was the one thing other than Dante and yourself, that was the one thing that you would run back into a burning building to save?
It's priceless. It's Clive Barker.
And it's original.
It's a fantastic painting. Like,
we'll try and grab a photo. Well, you know what? We'll try and grab a photo and we'll throw it up online at some point. Because
we put it on the cover. We put it on the cover of the magazine. So even if you look up Rue Morgue and Clive Barker, you might be able to find that issue.
Okay. And rapid fire, and our last question, of course, rapid fire, have your say. There's a lot of chatter lately online about how big films are too formulaic. Care to comment?
Big films? You mean like big budget, big Hollywood?
Yeah.
I'm going to agree. Indie is where the heart is. Indie is where ideas are being tested and formulas are being challenged. And that's where the up and coming creatives are coming. I'm going to agree with that.
Okay. The correct answer is no. But thanks. We appreciate your insight into that. And I'm sure our audience does as well. And that does it. You survived. This is the rapid fire question. That does it for rapid fire. Of course, this part of the program is brought to us by Wellington Brewery's Hellas Lager, Hellas Yeah, which is right here and delicious. I'm sorry, Andrea, next time I'll make sure that the delivery guy shows up on time and delivers some fresh cold cans right to your doorstep.
I would have gotten more of them right. With proper fuel in the tank.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we've got a few more comments from our audience, and I got a couple more questions I'd love to ask you. Are you able to stick around for a little while? Just a little while longer? Okay, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back with Andrea Subissati right after this.
Black Fawn Distro. Movies, merchandise, available now at blackfawndistribution.com.
And we're back. And of course, joining me still is executive editor of Rue Morgue Magazine, Andrea Subissati. Andrea, thanks so much for sticking around. We're, of course, broadcasting live to Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. And whatever platform you're listening to us on, please remember to like, follow, share, and subscribe. Shameless self-promotion. It helps out me. It helps out the show. It helps out Black Fawn. But it also helps out all of our guests as well. Every guest that we have on has a super cool project that they're working on or is about to have it come out. So, please follow along, follow them as well on social media. It does really, really help. Something that we've all noticed over the last couple of years and that we'll continue to be doing over the next few years. So anyway, couple comments from our guest tonight. Of course, I can't help but put this up, but we fucking love Benner. Thank you, Spinsters of Horror. You're my cheerleaders, and I love you. And of course, from our head honcho, our big cheese, Chad Archibald. Oh, I'm listening.
There he is.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks for tuning. Thanks for joining us, buddy. And of course, there's let me see here. Oh, just a quick thing going back to
Chad. I'll send you my invoice. Benner said I'm getting like $1,000 for this.
Yeah,
right?
but you have
I'll
to
send it to
invoice. You have to invoice Black Fawn Films. That's the other company.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And a quick thing as well here. There's a German 4K release of The Sadness with English subs right now on Amazon
4K.
Germany. But that's but you know what? Stick around. See what comes out. See what comes out in Canada, because you can also, there's a lot of places you can order it from in Canada. Other small businesses that you can order it from. We do our best not to give Jeff Bezos any more money. So do what you can. If you have to order on Amazon, I guess as a collector, I get it, man. You gotta get it where you can get it. But if you can get it from a local distributor, or from a local show like Niagara Falls Comic Con or Frightmare or Rue Morgue Spooky Flea Market on June 11th, try and do that, because it makes an impact, and nobody has to pay those ridiculous exorbitant distribution fees on top of that. So anyway, let's get back to chatting. There's one thing I wanted to talk to you specifically about, and it's just kind of, this is sort of being a little bit of an ongoing conversation that I've had with a variety of guests on the program. And that's just like having more voices at the table, and, you know, calling that whatever it is, if it's representation in film or women in film or whatever. Basically, how do we get more voices talking about horror or involved in the horror genre? I always joke around about to people, like, everyone starts in horror, like everyone, like Peter Jackson, Leo DiCaprio, like everybody always starts in horror. And it seems to be like it's certainly influencing a lot of things right now, as far as, you know, high concept horror or social commentary stuff, which is not, you know, obviously I don't want that in every film, but the horror genre specifically seems to be really making inroads on that. What's your thoughts on that, and where do you see things going next? And
I agree with you. I have always felt like horror has been on the vanguard of important social change, and that's because I think that horror is inherently transgressive, and the way we approach horror, the way we look at horror, the way we analyze what's going on in horror, the representation is necessary, because so much evil in the world has to do with sexism, has to do with racism, has to do with homophobia. So it kind of stands to reason that these issues would be tackled within the genre before anywhere else. I mean, like, yeah, they're going to be tackled in dramas where it's going to be like a sappy melodrama that doesn't actually challenge anything. It makes you feel something, but it doesn't necessarily make you think stuff. So yeah, I'm seeing great change in that regard, and of course, it can always get better. I think it's noteworthy that a lot of
yeah, well, I think
authors.
Yeah, sorry. I think we're
up on you?
Yeah, I think we're just hitting that little delay there. Sorry about that, folks. No, I think we're good now. It's probably just some interference from somewhere, but yeah, no, go ahead. You were talking about authors, I think, is where you left off. Oh, and maybe I think we're running into some technical difficulties right now. I'm just going to talk for a little bit here, just while we kind of give that just a little bit of time to get going. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. Of course, we're available. You can follow us along on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. And of course, if you are checking us out on after the fact, you can catch us on one of our rebroadcasts, which is put out on basically every Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, on all the major streaming platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So catch us where you can. Andrea, I think you're back with us right now, right? So yes, I think so. Yeah, there you are.
I didn't realize that those stupid faces I was making to test it were just delayed and going to pop up a second later. So that's real cool.
We already had a chat about this. Don't blink. That's the trick.
I forgot.
Anyway, sorry for the technical difficulties there, guys. But just we were talking about just how more voices are sort of emerging and in the horror genre, and kind of what's coming next, and how do we get to, like, even a better point than where we are now.
Yeah, I feel like, the first step is kind of a lot of female critics, a lot of writers who are people of color are raising really important conversations and levels of inquiry about horror movies. And because of podcasts and content creation on social media, the barriers to enter that game are very low. And so a lot of people are having their voices heard as regards what they have to say about the genre. However, when you look at people making horror, it's still a lot of white dudes. It's more and more white women, but I think there's still a great disparity there. And I think a lot of people who are interested in horror wind up going into horror criticism because there are bigger barriers to actually making horror. So I think that's really going to be the final frontier is when the creators become more balanced.
Yeah. And I think that at some point too, there was I almost felt like there was people weren't sure how to criticize horror that was coming out that was made by non-white dudes. And I thought that was interesting for a time, because again, it's like, I know there's a bunch of stuff going on, but it's like, I really just want to read great criticism of the story, the characters of the film. Is it worth your entertainment dollar? Is it worth your time? And if anything, nowadays it's time. That's the biggest commodity for a lot of people. And also you're competing, anything that comes out is really competing with all of these streaming platforms. And like the joke about, flipping through Netflix, trying to find something to watch takes you longer than watching an actual film. Like there's a lot of truth to that.
There is.
And so I think that film criticism especially is very important, and having those, like, I think it's better for a film if it has more voices saying, hey, this is good. Like, check this out. It's worthwhile. I'm not sure if we had that before. I really don't think we did until maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. I think it really started to change around 2018 is where I kind of saw it changing, where you would see more, more Black critics, more women critics, more, and reviewing the same stuff. Like, I think for a long time, horror movies, action movies, like it was dudes reviewing those movies because they just felt that like potentially women or non-white dudes wouldn't appeal to them. And now we're seeing sort of like that sort of maybe reversing a little bit, which is interesting.
There's such tremendous variety out there that I think what's more important now is people have tremendous choice in terms of like finding a critic whose tastes you share, whose opinion you respect, and then you can kind of follow them and glom onto them. But like for me, the way I talk about horror movies in the magazine is different from how I talk about horror movies in Faculty of Horror. And I also get, sometimes I get mail at the magazine that's like, it's too feminist, it's too politically correct, leave politics out of horror. And then other people are like, no, like you addressing power imbalances makes me feel seen and makes me feel validated. And, there's something out there for everyone. And you're right. I don't think film criticism is no longer this monolithic ivory tower gatekeepy type shit. Everybody has a voice thanks to the internet, and, just find someone whose voice you like to hear.
And it's amazing how many great writers are out there too that may not have been discovered had they not had any, like a blog or like a social media feed to kind of promote their own ideas through. I think and I know on a big level type thing, a lot of people, like what you just said, there's a lot of feeling about that. Leave the politics out of it. It's, all this stuff. But I think I think that comes down to the fact of people don't necessarily go in and read the reviews. It's like they don't go and read 350 reviews for one film. Like it's impossible unless it's your own film. And I can tell you that from personal experience. But it was interesting. I mean, I remember when we released The Oak Room, as a film with just with no actresses in it. It's all men. And we were like, okay, so this is how we're going to kind of approach this. This is how we're going to, get this film out there. And we were kind of worried, like a little bit, just because we're like, we don't know if the environment, and it was during the pandemic too. So it was all this stuff going on. Right. So we were like, we're not sure how this is going to resonate, and we'll see. Like, we think it's done this way, and it's not like it wasn't done in a way that was like exclusionary. It was done in a way because it was a story that was like, that we thought had some importance to be told. And it was really interesting reading all of the reviews. And I think it was probably about after like the 40th review, I think, like it played Fantasia. We got a great response from that. And because it was so many different people reviewing it. So there was men, women, people of color, LGBTQ reviewers reviewing it, and kind of, all had a different opinion on it, but like really kind of got the main vibe of the film. And that was kind of when I really sat there and said, this is about storytelling. It's about putting out good content that connects with everyone. And I think a lot of that stuff is based around the human component and not a political component, and not the agenda, like an agenda component or anything like that. I used quotations lightly on that, but I just feel like it's like, that's the thing that connects still. And I think that's kind of always been true, but I'm not sure.
Well, you can tell when somebody is paying lip service to political correctness. You can tell when somebody is trying to capitalize on BLM with some token representation. And I remember that that came up when you were talking to Carolyn, and she mentioned a specific movie, and I was like, "Oh, I know exactly what she's talking about." If you're sincere and you're earnest and you're not afraid to make a mistake and get it wrong, I think a lot of people are intimidated by political correctness because they see it as hostile. They see it as cancel culture. They see it as censorship, and it's none of those things. As long as you have an open mind and you're willing to
Yeah.
correctives that you don't come to naturally, you're fine. Don't be scared.
Yeah, I think it's finding ways to kind of people think it's ways to combat that, and it's not. It's just a way of like forcing yourself to kind of grow into a new direction. And that's something that has always happened in films, I think. I mean, I don't know. Like I have this conversation all the time, and I just say it's not cancel culture. It's just like it in the same way that you couldn't make a movie that you made in the 70s like today. You just couldn't, because it was a totally different time period. It was the Wild West, and the films that you got out of that era were fantastic, amazing, some of the best films ever made, and probably will hold that sort of top tier for a long, 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 long time. But could you recreate that and make that today? I don't think you could at all. And it's not necessarily because of political correctness. It's because of everything else. It's where socially where everyone was in the 70s. Like we're not going back. I mean, people say all the time, like they're like, well, I don't know about that. I'm like, okay, well, people didn't have phones. So like there's like the whole mental capacity of a society is totally different, right? People get their news from a newspaper, maybe a radio. And so now I look at it today, and when people say that, I'm like, just find a new way to make films, make a new way to tell stories. And there's as far as I can tell, there's a lot of stories left to tell. So that should be interesting.
That's right. And then there's also the aspect that, like, art lives on beyond you and outside of you. And, some movies take 10 years to get their due. Some movies take 20 years to get their due. Some movies hold up 50 years later, and others fizzle into obscurity. And some of the biggest hits were like accidents, lightning in a bottle. And so I don't think anyone should be trying to make Night of the Living Dead, but try to make your own Night of the Living Dead by being sincere and being earnest and being awesome and making the art. You know what I mean? Don't imitate Night of the Living Dead. Innovate like Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, exactly. So before I let you go, a couple quick things to get to. What's your take on this whole kind of new wave of like rebootquels or requels, or movies that are sort of like actively leaving out a whole bunch of sequels and kind of like continuing on from the first one? It's like the remakes from 4 years ago. And the reason I bring it up is because of course we just did our Hot Stove from Hell episode about Scream. Had the Spinsters on, had Bry Barrett on, and of course Jessica Buck from Rue Morgue. And we really started talking about Scream 4 and how Scream 4 is one of those movies that has really stood the test of time, because they were talking about remakes, and we're sort of in this weird limbo place where we're like, we're kind of still making these remakes, but they've been recategorized as sequels. Your thoughts? Because I'm really interested to see what you think.
Well, I mean, I think reboots and sequels and franchise love, like, it is kind of a cyclical thing, and I do feel like we're in a moment now where it'll die off and then it'll come back again. But I think what's interesting about this permutation is that at this point in cinema history, not only do we have the execs who are like, I don't want to risk my money. I know people are going to come see a new Halloween, so let's just put out whatever new Halloween. We are also of the age where this generation of young filmmakers grew up on those movies. And so of course they want to remake Halloween because they've seen it 100,000 times and have had 30, 40 years in their head to think of how they would take it, how they would make it different. So I kind of get that in that respect. And honestly, had you asked me this question a month ago, I would have been like, I'm fucking over it. Reboots, stop. They're all stinky. They're all getting rushed. They're crap. They're garbage. But I really, really enjoyed that Scream reboot. Holy shit.
I thought it was decent too.
I saw it late because, like I said, so many of them were just kind of poopy that I was like, I'll get to it. But I loved it.
It was the first movie I saw when they reopened the theaters.
Ooh,
and
nice.
it was like a fun thing to do. And and I just watched all the other 4 movies before I went to see it. So it was really fun. But yeah, I think if it's done right, but I mean, Scream is kind of like one of those, it's always one of those franchises. It's always been self-aware, clearly, right? That's that type of movie. But yeah, the others, I'm not sure. I wonder if Hollywood is out of ideas, and I'm wondering if we might enter into like a new kind of, I just want them to give less money to more filmmakers.
I don't think it's that Hollywood is out of ideas. I think Hollywood is very risk averse, and that has to do with the economy and uncertainty and so many other things. But again, this goes back to that rapid fire question of like, this is why this is indie horror's time to shine, because there's no shortage of good ideas, and the little guys are putting out those good ideas.
Take the training wheels off. Just give some cash to these filmmakers, both men and women, all walks of life. Just throw them some cash and say, go make a fucking movie. And if it rocks, people will tell you it rocks. And if it doesn't, then it won't, right? But I don't know. I think that's all I got for you. That's anything to add? No, you're done.
That's a great interview, Benner. You're so good at this.
I've got a couple of last comments from our audience. And I am going to throw that out. I know the Spinsters are listening. So listen, somebody wrote kind of a lengthy entry in here. It may or may not have been from Chad. I'll leave it up to the Spinsters if they want me to post it. So if you're listening and you say yes, I'll post it. Yeah, quick question here from our friends of Spinsters. Andrea, any chance of a live Faculty of Horror event here in Toronto? And also, yes, this is Kelly.
Hi, Kelly. You know what? We were on the verge of planning something when COVID hit. I feel like the tricky thing is we don't know how big our audience is here in Toronto. Like, you're a podcaster, like you've got the shitty stats that you can get from Spotify. But how many people are listening in a given region as opposed to how many people would come out and see us live? It's hard to imagine how many we would bring out, which makes it hard to book a venue because, dear God, shoot me in the face if if I'm taking my time to do a live show in front of like 10 people. I don't think that would happen, but I'm not averse to it. It's just tricky. I don't know how to set it up.
Okay, fair enough. We just had I know people have been listening to the whole show. Really do appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. Of course, we have an explanation now for the, there was a couple of glitches in the, in the broadcast, just technical stuff that we can't avoid sometimes. But yeah, we had someone pop in. MJ Montgomery said, sorry, I opened up the Necronomicon and it messed things up. That explains it. That explains it. No problem, man. We forgive you for sure. And of course, yes, Spinsters wanted to say, yes, post it. Okay, here we go. And one last question from Carolyn. This was a great interview. Thanks a lot, Carolyn. Appreciate you tuning in. And yeah, it was a great interview. And I learned some stuff too, which is awesome. So, all right. So Spinsters are saying, yes, post this long thing. This is from Chad Archibald, of course. He's saying, thanks for coming on the show, Andrea. Like always, it's a pleasure listening to your wealth of knowledge. Thanks for your endless contribution to the horror community. Long live Rue Morgue. Also, for the record, I love Benner too most of the time. There we go.
Worth it.
All right. So on that note, of course, a last question for you. What do you have coming up next? Obviously, we got Spooky Flea Market happening on June 11th. But past that, what's next for Rue Morgue? And look at this little doggy here. Hey, Dante.
His breath sucks right now. What have you been? I think I just woke him up from a nap. So he's like, nom. Prior to Spooky Flea Market, again, if you want to check out The Sadness, it is hitting Shudder this Thursday. And so I'm doing a watch party, and we are going to have the writer-director Rob Jabaz in our Zoom to talk about it afterwards, or perhaps to answer for it. afterwards. It's a controversial film. It's going to hit some nerves, and he's going to be there to take your questions. So I'm really excited about it. Also, that we have a coupon code set up such as if you don't have Shudder, you can get a free trial going so you can watch the movie with us. And that's this Thursday. So find that on Facebook. The new issue should be on stands now, if not very soon. Again, sorry for supply shortages, but it's not our fault. You can also order from the website, and you can subscribe at the website as well. What else? Faculty of Horror. We are recording our new episode this weekend. Our next episode is going to be on A Clockwork Orange, which, to be honest, I haven't even thought about since I did my independent study on it in like high school. So I can't wait to talk to Alex about it and see how it holds up.
Very cool. And sorry, when's that going down again?
We are recording that's going to be the May episode. So it should be out sometime in May.
Okay, very cool. I will check that out as well. I'm a huge Clockwork Orange fan.
Nice.
And of course, yeah, everyone else out there, you can obviously follow Andrea Subissati. I got to say, I love saying your full name. It's the best. But you can follow Andrea online at Necromandria. And you can also follow Rue Morgue on Instagram at Rue Morgue Mag. Of course, check out their website, which is rue-morgue.com. You can subscribe, which I highly recommend, or you can pick up the latest issue on newsstands, because guess what? We're allowed to go to stores now, and you can pick up physical copies of stuff. And I'd recommend that too, because it's always a little bit of an adventure going into a store and picking up a horror magazine, and it'll keep you entertained for hours. Of course, if you have any feedback from the show, please, and you're looking to get in touch, drop us a line, or you have a recommendation for a future guest or something to cover or whatever, drop us a line at takeover@blackfawndistribution.com. And of course, my guest tonight was the awesome, incredible, one of a kind, Andrea Subissati, and obviously her little co-host here, best helper ever, which is Dante of the Dead. But Andrea, thanks so much. I will echo Chad's sentiments for sure. We really do appreciate everything you've done for the horror community that we find ourselves a part of. And you and your team have always been super supportive of us, and we couldn't thank you enough. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Benner. Back at you.
Awesome. Well, so I think that's everything. And let me see here. There's if you're listening to one of our rebroadcasts, just a reminder that we always broadcast live, usually every couple of weeks, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. So you can catch us the live broadcast if you'd like to. But if not, keep listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you pick up your podcasts. Until next time, I'm your host, Benner from Black Fawn Distro. Andrea, anything to add before we go?
Keep it spooky.
Keep it spooky. Stick around after the show, after we go off air. I just want to follow up on a couple of things with you. And in the meantime, Spooky Flea Market, June 11th, all the stuff that Andrea just talked about, make sure you check that out via Rue Morgue and via Rue Morgue TV on YouTube. Lots of really, really cool projects coming out. And of course, we'll see you next time. Like you said, stay spooky. We'll do our best as well. Bye, Dante. Peace out.
Goodbye.
And that does it for another episode of Black Fawn Distro's Takeover Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, please remember to like, follow, share, and subscribe, and help us spread the word about the program and our incredible guests. If you're interested in grabbing some more information about Black Fawn Distribution or want to check out our film titles and merchandise, you can find us online at blackfawndistribution.com. We'd also like to thank our sponsors: Wellington Brewery's Hellas Lager, Deadly Grounds Coffee, Twisted Teas, and of course, Black Fawn Distribution. Just a reminder, you can always catch Black Fawn Distro's Takeover Tuesday live on Facebook, YouTube, and our other social media platforms. Or pick up one of our retransmissions on any of the major streaming platforms. Until next time, I'm your host, Benner from Black Fawn Distro, and we'll see you soon.